Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and we are starting our week 2 of Assistant Coaches Month. And this is my favorite month of the year. Last week, we had on Bobby Donahue from Wilmington High School, and someone who's ready to be a head coach, who's very involved, someone I had the pleasure of coaching. So I got to see them really grow at high school and college. And this guest today is really interesting to me. I would say this one's my pick. This one's my pick for a lot of different reasons. The resume was through the roof, the coaching recommendation was through the roof, but also a fellow podcaster, really involved with the youth and really involved in sports, and kind of reminds me of myself a little bit in a lot of ways, just chatting with him on the phone and reading his recommendations and so on. So I'm really excited to have on, and I'm just going to read a little bit about our guest and kind of, what their background here is a little bit. They're assistant baseball coach at East Boston High School, going into the second full season. And obviously with COVID and everything else, it would be a lot longer, I'm sure, had that not all happened, and works at the base, which is a baseball facility, training facility in Roxbury. I looked it up after we spoke. A really cool place, and a really cool place for a coach to develop. And obviously, as I mentioned, the host and creator of Since the Sandbox Podcast, which we'll jump into later on, which is a really cool podcast that I listen to, and all at the age of 25, man. So pretty impressive there as well. So without further ado, from East Boston High School baseball, Steve Tauro.
Wow, Anthony, thank you. This was a long time coming. We having these conversations, probably dating back to over a year ago now, when we first kind of connected on social media. But I gotta say, that was a killer intro. Maybe one that can't be beat. Definitely tops my intros on Since the Sandbox. But Anthony, I think what you really do here at Beyond Podcast is really cool. So happy to be on and being recognized as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I get that a lot about my intros. People love my intros, and I take pride in it now. Now it's like expected. So I appreciate that.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you. I appreciate that. So I'm going to ask you right out the gate, East Boston, is all I hear about is Santapio's Pizza. It's the best. It's unbelievable. It's a place to go. And I'm sure it is awesome. Is that what people from East Boston would also say? Like, I'm saying that from a guy from Medford, Wilmington. Like, do East Boston people agree with that?
Listen, I lived 2 blocks away from Santapio's. That was the go-to slice. The atmosphere, the environment, I mean, it doesn't get more East Boston than Santapio's, honestly. But even, being able to get it on takeout, you go right into the kitchen. I mean, I feel like that's no other experience. And there's also not another place that recommends mixing a little bit of pepper juice with your pizza. So that if you ever go into Santapio's, Anthony, definitely try that. That is the go-to slice. I know there's, the debate, Regina, Pocari's, Santapio's. Now that I'm up in Wakefield, I do get to have, the best of both worlds, but I definitely miss having Santapio's right around the corner from me. Is the best slice I've ever had.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've heard that a lot. I mean, I'm a big Cheney's guy. I don't know if you know Cheney's at all, by the Boston Garden. Joe Spagnuolo and all his guys there. Their slice is pretty good too, but I've heard the hype on Santapio's for a long time. I've never make it into East Boston. Like, I go into Boston and then there's almost like this invisible force field that like cuts me off or whatever, and I don't go any further. So it's a spot that I've always wanted to try. I've heard it, and first guest I've ever had on from East Boston. So I just had to ask you, man, right away.
Hey, listen,
right away.
I take pride in that. Take pride in that.
Awesome. So, obviously we're joking around with that, but jumping into like your baseball career here a little bit. And what really stood out to me is obviously I love the East Boston colors. I think you guys have the best colors. When I used to scout Austin Prep a lot in football, you guys would play Austin Prep. And so I would always dig the jerseys and dig the colors, like old school Rams. Like, I like it. I dig it a lot. But you grew up in East Boston. You played sports in East Boston. I mean, it's in your blood. What was the first time that you maybe said to yourself, like, I see coaching kind of in my future, and I definitely want to coach where I grew up and played?
Yeah, definitely got to say, I bleed blue and gold. You slice me open. That's what'll come out. And if you guys follow the podcast, Since the Sandbox Podcast, you'll see that emulated everywhere. But, always playing sports growing up. East Boston hockey. We were the Mustangs back in the day. And we actually ended up merging with Malden Medford and being Malden East Boston, right around 2010 or so. But, I just being like basketball, baseball, it was all, so fun. And I knew that, the chance to be able to play that at the next level is very slim, but I also have a big background in working with kids, Anthony, as you've done your research, your homework on me. And I just really like having that impact and being able to, be someone that the kids can look up to, because you never know what they're really going on with at home. And sometimes being somebody that can relate to, those scenarios and want the best interest of the kids that you're surrounded with. I feel like that's really, the main reason why I do coach. And a lot of the guys at East Boston High School were kids that I had it back at the Boys and Girls Club. So I think it's a really cool experience.
Yeah, and I love saying that. I mean, I'm a fifth grade teacher, and I felt like teaching and coaching my entire career, they were parallel to one another, and one helped me get so much better at the other. So I love that you kind of started the answer with just talking about there's so much more going on with kids. I mean, there'd be times like at practice that some of them, when I was a defensive coordinator, for example, that like some of my positional guys were like, "What's wrong with so and so? They're off today," and blah blah blah. And then you find out like they broke up with their girlfriend, which to us doesn't seem like a big deal, but to their world, it's crushing, So
Yeah.
the coach is like, "Oh my God." It's like, yeah, guys, but to him, he doesn't understand that. So like really getting to understand your players sometimes. And again, things that don't seem like a big deal to us, it's the world to them, especially at a young age. So I love that you said that and you're engaged with your players, not just obviously with the product on the baseball field, but obviously off of it of who they are as people, because eventually they leave you and they have memories of you. And it's really important to make sure that they're good ones, or lasting ones anyways.
No,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, man.
I
Oh,
think it's important. And I just think that, like you said, you never know really how you're remembered to somebody else, but, you're just kind of like that thing of, treat others how you want to be treated. I mean, that I just try and emulate what I would expect in a coach. So, I hope that, the players that I do coach, respect that.
yeah, man, and obviously your head coach thinks the same exact thing. Like I said to you, you were kind of my choice on here just because I felt like your resume was through the roof. But the coaching side that we're talking about now, and I hope I say this right, your head coach from East Boston, Jeff Arnella, and I know is somebody that you play for as well, just sent a few kind words. So I like to read these out loud in the podcast, just so our listeners understand that it's not just a random process of people getting on here. There's an involvement of getting the head coach involved and them reaching out and kind of getting some feedback. And, these are tough decisions to make. There's only 1 month and I do 4 episodes a month, and, there's 32 applicants that we had. So it's not easy. Steve brings experience to my program. He played for me and understands my systems and expectations that I have for the student athletes on the team. Steve is a leader both on and off the field. He works and helps players develop at the base, a baseball training facility, and really understands how to talk, motivate, and really develop players all around game. Steve is a person you always want to be around. I mean, it's pretty good, man. That's pretty good. So, hearing that from someone who I know you played for, there's obviously that respect. And then there's that respect as a coach to watch the process from the other side a little bit. So what does that mean to you hearing those words said about you?
Shout out Coach Jeff Aranella, my guy. Yeah, I do think it's a really cool experience because, he was my coach for hockey. He was my coach for baseball when I was in high school. So there was always, a relationship there, and something that really sticks out about Jeff, or Coach Jeff. And you'll find out why with the story is when you're his player, if you're in the classroom, he wants you to call him Mr. Aranella, but if you're his player, he always wants to be addressed as coach. And he takes pride in that title. So he never responded to anybody unless you called him Coach Jeff. So, always just having that respect thing was really cool, about his relationship. And I was a captain under one of his teams, my hockey 2015 senior year. I was a captain. We ended up winning the city championship. That run ended up going 10 games straight. So it was a really cool, interesting twist there. But also with baseball, we were in the city championship my senior year. We ended up going 14 innings versus Boston Latin Academy. And we'll talk more about them later on. I saw some of your questions earlier. So,
Yeah.
just knowing Jeff and his experience with his family, and them having a relationship with my family was really cool. And the fact that he wants some of the guys that he has a relationship with to come back and have an experience and a role in the school and really empower them to go right to the varsity level, just knowing the experience that I had as a player and how I was a leader on the field and off the field. That's what I really respect and love about Jeff.
Yeah, and I think those are skills you take into life. Like I was talking to our guest last week, and that's what we were saying. Like these are skills of like responsibility and time management. Even you saying like joining with another city or town to kind of do that type of team, like that means you're traveling to their spot a lot too. So for you, it's typically you have your away games, but even your home games were kind of sometimes away games for you as well, a little bit in a lot of senses. I'm just curious, did you notice a difference? And I've never really had a guest to ask this to. Did you notice a difference in coaching style between your coach in baseball versus hockey? I mean, the games are different, but I mean, as far as like
Yeah,
overall demeanor.
that's an interesting question. And what I like about it is the fact that he kind of kept like his style for like both sports. And like he was definitely someone that like in high school that you would view as like a player's coach, but when it was also time to like get to business, like he knew how to get to business too. But it was always, about, the player's best interest. And at most times, he wasn't someone that was, outspoken when he was like an assistant coach, but it is kind of cool to see, how that changed and, the vocalness now, as being, a head coach in that role. But yeah, definitely doing both sports. I think teaching the game is definitely different, but having fun with the players and being able to have that relationship, I definitely think that he controlled that the same way in both, and I definitely appreciated that.
Yeah, it's real cool. Because like different sports, sometimes it's just how you talk to kids are a little different. The mentality is a little bit different. So yeah, that's really interesting. It's a good answer with it too. So listen, I'm a baseball. I watch baseball like any other average fan would watch baseball on TV or watch a high school baseball game. I don't see the small things that probably go on or the decisions you got to make as a coach or things like that. I'm a very average fan when it comes to that. So talk about, I guess, your coaching style, right? You're an assistant coach. You played the game for a long time. I mean, how do you look at the game as far as how to like build your lineup 1 through 9? Like, obviously I know like 1 through 4, 1 through 5, kind of what the, I guess, description is of those types of batters, but I guess building the back part of your lineup, I don't know that lot about. Like, how do you pick the last batter? Sometimes I know when you're younger, it's probably about skill, but here it might be about strategy or speed or on base percentage or things like that. So I'm just curious, like, to hear your mindset a little bit as far as how baseball goes, pitching, fielding, all of that lineup. Just curious to see what you think about the game in general.
Yeah, of course. And it's a really interesting question because I think baseball is a really different sport compared to the other sports, honestly. And I think the hardest and the thing that gets most overlooked about baseball is you have to do a lot of life teaching. And the reason why I say that is because baseball is a game of failure, right? If you hit if you strike out 7 out of 10 times and you hit 300, you're considered a great hitter.
It's insane. That stat to me, like, it's so right. I say that to so many people, like batting like 275, 280 is okay. Like, and you're like,
Yeah.
what? It is
Yeah.
funny.
So I definitely think that, that's the interesting about baseball is sometimes you do have to teach failure and failures are repetitive, but how you overcome it and how you move around the obstacles that come with the game of baseball and the factors and things you can't control, like let's say weather or injuries or, school grades and things like that, that are outside the game of baseball. But I definitely think that there's coaching styles when it comes to, the game itself, but I definitely think that failure is the first thing that you kind of have to get your players to accept. But as far as a lineup goes, I do like to have balance throughout the lineup, and contact guy always won. I feel like that's grandfathered in with baseball. And two, like I like to have one of your smarter hitters at two because you always look down at the bottom end of the lineup, and you always get to this scenario where your eighth or ninth guy you kind of need a big at bat from. So I kind of like doing the second leadoff type thing. Where they have, a very good percentage hitter at the bottom of the lineup. But, you want your strongest hitter at 3, your power hitter at 4. I always remember, my days of playing baseball. I always respected, the 3, 4, 5 guys because, that's the media lineup. That's where a lot of your runs come in. And that expectation's there when you hear your name in the circle and you're clapping it up before the games and things like that. And I do think coaching style changes too, depending on how well you know your opponents. You were talking about rivalry games, and when you start to see styles and you get to see some of the same pitches, you start to pick up tendencies. I feel like that's important with baseball. Maybe you realize, a catcher's arm isn't too good, and you can be a little bit more aggressive on the base path. Or if there's, a pull hitter, you could slide your guys towards a certain way. But, you know, I always like having a strong starting pitcher. You know, if you can give me 5 to 6 solid innings and we can have somebody come in, great. If you can finish the game, great. I do think, you know, baseball does, like I said, have a lot of factors. And sometimes, you know, the great thing with baseball is, you know, a lot of the coaching on the fly. But, you know, I do think that you do have your bread and butter that sticks out. And I would say that, you know, above all, of one of my skills, or one of the skills that I like to emulate in baseball is having a balanced batting lineup is extremely important.
No, it is, you know, and I watch the game so much, and you know, I've watched my fair share and played in my fair share of men's league softball games. No, I'm just kidding, but like,
They're fun.
but yeah, you know, you know, building a lineup, I always find it so interesting because sometimes I see how people do their lineups, or you know, like you mentioned the 1-2 spot. Like I've seen so many people having like speed at their last batter, you know. So if they get on base and then their best contact guy can hit the ball, now you get speed on the field, you know, speed on the base paths to be able to then have kind of like your 2, 3, 4, 5 come. So, and I just always interested in every sport's different. And I really, honestly, I like really thinking back on it, you are probably the first baseball person we've had on here, not on purpose. You know, I reach out to some baseball coaches and, you know, we just can't make things work. But, you know, baseball and lacrosse are 2 sports that I hope I cover a lot more, especially baseball, because I just think that mindset of strategy and innings and positions and pinch runners. And I think that's all just really cool. And it's kind of, you know, I'm sure you have an idea going into it like in any other sport, but things on the fly sometimes happen or unexpectedly happen. You got to make those decisions. So it's cool, man. So high school dugouts, one thing that I think is really cool, and I've been seeing it at the college level, but I've been seeing it a little bit more at the high school level, is East Boston's dugout an animated dugout? Do you have fun in there? I mean, what is it about a baseball dugout that is just like fun?
Um, So I'll say that nowadays I think we're a little less animated than maybe we were when I was in high school. And that, you know, that could be for a bunch of different reasons, but something, you know, as a coach that we always try and reiterate to the players is that, you know, you always want to support your guys. And when you're up at bat, you know, you don't want to go up to bat and it just be that quiet, you know, where you can hear, you know, the fastball hitting the mitt and it's like, okay, it's just like the whole park silent, like the pressure's on. Like you want to be able to get some encouragement and things like that to be a little bit of a distraction or any way that can help a batter. So you know, we want our guys talking. We don't want them, you know, attacking the other team or anything like that. We just want to make sure that our guys are always supporting our guys. But that's not even just at bat. That's in the field too. You know, a pitcher is involved every play. A catcher's involved every play. Everyone should be moving. So if everyone's focused as to what's at task for the next pitch or the next play, I feel like that's what's really important. But Anthony, I got to say, we got a lot of firsts going on. First Eastie, first baseball. I'm liking all these firsts.
Yeah, listen, man. You know, I'm such a North Shore like coaches just because of all the coaches that I know in that area. So going just anything south of Boston, east of Boston, or whatever, it's cool to be able to get, you know, more because there's so many great high schools out there. And as I'm watching these like MIAA tournaments or keeping track of them on Twitter, like you're seeing these matchups from like towns that like I personally have never heard of. I didn't even know existed in Massachusetts, you know, and that's no knock to them. It's just like Western Mass is like, I wouldn't even know, like figure it's a part of the state because I just don't know much about it or many places out there. So I'm glad that, yeah, we're going to be checking off a lot of firsts today. First person with the podcast too. So this is actually you're the second. You're actually the second. No, Mike Scarfo. Ironic enough, last assistant coaches month last year at this time that I had on here, he's a high school teacher. He's a basketball teacher in Andover who's unbelievable this year. I think they're like number 2 in the state overall. And he has a really cool podcast called The Turntable Teachers. We're going to be collaborating with them with music and sports, and you have a few fun things coming up. We currently have a hype music tournament on right now, NCAA style bracket, you know. So he's been doing some great stuff. So you're the second, but still, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I've had like 55 guests on here, so that's pretty good. It's pretty good. Let's talk a little bit too about the bat flip. Are you a fan of the bat flip in baseball? Because I think it's one of the things that has kind of brought swag a little bit to baseball, you know, that's maybe been lacking or missing. I'm just curious as a baseball guy playing it, watching it, coaching it, what's your thought?
All right, professionally, I'm all about it. If I see that in high school as a coach, I want to bury the team. I don't want my guys doing that. Honestly, look, if you could do it, it's cool because like I'll still catch myself trying to do it, you know, at practice or some things like that. But No, I'm not a bat flip guy. I want us to win the right way. I want us to have some respect, and a lot of things like that can be taken, for outside the game of baseball. And I would never want to take away what the game has to offer. Can teach you a lot and can be a lot of fun. But like I said, professionally, you're in college, all about it. But at the high school level, no, I'm definitely not a fan. Are you?
Yeah. I mean, at the high school level, no, I totally agree
Yeah.
with that. And I guess that's what's hard, right? Because these kids are watching that and seeing that, so they want to emulate it, right? So, in one case, yes, I'm an absolute fan of it because, like I said, I think baseball, compared to the other three major sports with basketball, hockey, and football, is just kind of missing that element a little bit at times,
Hmm.
And I mean, obviously, there's a strike that's going to happen, and that's just a whole different ball game to talk about. But I loved kind of seeing that brought back, and it was like guys in their like early to mid 20s that doing this. And yeah, sometimes it's definitely not the spot to do it. Just like I'm sure in any other sport we can name, like running the clock up or scoring a late touchdown or throwing the ball up 30. I mean, like there's those unwritten rules in sports, and maybe the bat flip is one of them, looking at the other team's dugout, probably most likely. But I think it's cool though. On the same
Yeah.
token, it's badass. Like you hit a home run, you knock it out of the park. I mean, to win the game and your team comes running out of the dugout, yeah, there's a level of excitement. So I don't know. That's just my opinion,
Nah,
but
listen. Hey, I respect it, and it definitely is, cool. Um,
yeah.
but you know what? I think hitting the home run is more cool, honestly.
So yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, being able to win the game, yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. I totally agree in that aspect. It's tough. I go back and forth. Eastie, obviously growing up, I know like Eastie and Celtic is kind of always a big rivalry. I don't know if that rivalry still has the same, muscle that it did when I was growing up. But maybe outside of Celtic, we can talk about the Celtic rivalry most certainly. What are some other like teams or places that like schools like when you're on the schedule, man, like you guys are ready to go. Like that
Yeah.
team is a team you want to beat.
So Eastie Celtic is definitely a big rivalry thing. I will say that's a little bit more football focused. Celtics in the middle of merging. They merging with XL High School right now. So they're getting a lot of their players from there as well. But yeah, the Eastie Celtic football thing, that's one for the decades, one of the best rivalries in Massachusetts, if not the country. For all the high school Thanksgiving games, especially. But for baseball, we just played in our fall league. I know we're going to talk about the fall league a little bit, but we do play against Boston Latin Academy. And I got to say, that's a team that every single time they're on the schedule, we really want to make sure we beat them. And here's a little interesting thing to know. I don't know if you've ever had a scenario like this, but the head coach of Boston Latin Academy is actually a teacher at East Boston High School.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. I've
So
heard of it. I don't know anyone personally, but I've heard of it.
yeah, so he's a really cool dude. And I'm happy I get to see him on an often basis. A lot of his kids go over to the base, and I know we're gonna talk about the base as well. So he's always checking in on his guys like that. But that's a team that you always want to beat. And then when I was in high school, Boston English was a really good team. That's another team that has a really good program as well. So I gotta say that those two teams specifically are definitely teams that you want to get a W every time.
Yeah, we played Boston Latin Academy in football. We played actually at Charlestown High School. I think that was the field they had for that week. But yeah, they were young. I like the coach. I'm trying to think of his name. It was like Rizzo or something like that. He's a wicked nice guy. But yeah, they were tough. They were a tough team. But yeah, I always find the rivalry conference games as just being something that, it stands out to you. And I find a lot of coaches on here, especially where they've been coaching for a lot of years, well, and they might have like coached where they played. The answer that they give when they were a player is much different than the answer they give as a coach. Maybe because leagues change, and every so often the power swings a little bit to other teams or programs
Mhm.
get strong for a certain amount of years. So, but it's just always funny hearing that because a lot of coaches, you're a young guy, but a lot of like older coaches that I have on, it's funny when they answer that question or talk about that topic. It's always two completely different, high schools. So that's funny. But you mentioned it, so I'll just kind of jump into it. The base. What really again stood out with of this part of your resume to me was that you're doing this outside of just coaching. A high school team. I think developing as a coach is really important. We want our players to work out and lift and go to 7-on-7s. I'm talking at least the football world. And we want them to do so much. And in baseball, obviously, coaches have their expectations of what they want their kids to do. Some of it's playing maybe summer ball or fall ball, or some of it's just being an athlete and playing other sports and being active. But the one thing that I always kind of find with this is that you need as a grow as a coach too, and there's certain expectations. You can't just put the cleats away or put your stuff in your locker and then come back a week before baseball season starts and expect that you're just going to pick up from where you left off, or you're going to advance away to help your team get better. So you work at like a baseball facility that really helps train kids, just the small parts of their game, positionally, swinging the bat, stance. I'm sure there's a zillion other things that I don't know that you're going to be talking about in a second, but maybe talk about working at that spot and give them a little bit of a shout out, obviously, as well on here. But maybe I'll ask you this question in two parts. One is, how do you feel you grow as a coach, kind of going from being a coach on the field to being a coach training athletes? And then the second thing I'll ask you is the type of coach you are, as far as should they be baseball, baseball, baseball as much as they can? Or are you kind of like, I want them to play multiple sports and go that route? I always like to ask coaches those.
Yeah, so I'll get into how I got introduced to the base first. So it's actually really unique. The base started in 2013, but before that, it was the Boston Astros. So it's been around for a really long time. Um, but the base in 2013, I was in high school, so I first got introduced. They were doing free workouts over in East Boston at the Umana School, and there was like 50 of us that would go. And one of the guys that is the general manager over at the base now. His name is Steph Lewis. He was actually just on the Since the Sandbox Meet the People series. So I don't want to plug myself, but guys, go and check that out. It's a great conversation. But yeah, Steph is the general manager of baseball and softball operations over there. And we had a really good relationship, and he was the coach and the trainer for us back way back when. So after they saw us training, we were invited to play in their base hits league. So for like 3 or 4 summers straight, we're always going over to Roxbury, Dorchester, and playing in their leagues. And they had college showcases, they had tournaments, and all of that. And that was my first real experience to all of that. So I always looked up to the organization. And more baseball, I mean, I was definitely all about it, being able to have fun, compete, and play against a lot better talent, because you play your little leagues and they're all guys that from around the city and things like that. But when you go outside of your city, you start to see how the talent changes and how it's different. And the base really showed me that. And as a player, I really had the opportunity to become a leader when I was playing for there, and I really learned to develop as a pitcher through there as a player as well. So that was really cool. And then fast forwarding a little bit to 2019, I just graduated from Salem State, and I started working at East Boston High School as a substitute teacher. And the general manager from the base is actually a substitute teacher over there as well. So we asked myself and Coach Kev Sinatra, who I also do the podcast with, to come over and be instructors. So we went over to the base. We were instructors in the middle of COVID, and the practices were a lot smaller. It was like a 1-to-5 ratio where you can do practices. So that was a little different, because you're used to coaching like a whole team, and learning in a smaller way. I feel like really gave me a way to grow and develop a relationship with the kids as the practice was going on, because you weren't overwhelmed by the number of kids all around you. So I thought that was really cool. And after being an instructor for a couple of years at the base, I got the opportunity to be a part of their program team. So I think that was really cool. And what I think, really refines my skills about the base is the fact that they have so many guys with so much experience. I mean, there's guys that have played professionally, whether that's in Australia, AA, AAA ball, that are still playing college, that still play men's park league or Yawkey league. So, seeing all the way that they can tie in those skills and how it's, show to the players, and they come in and picking each other's brains through conversations of baseball. It's all really inspiring, and it really makes you want to be better all the time. And I know that there's definitely things on a daily basis, whether it's from another coach or it's from a kid that really practices hard, that's picked up a couple of things, whether they're watching online.
Right,
I feel like it's cool that you can learn from anybody. So the base is a really unique place where you don't just develop and grow your baseball, softball, or basketball skills, but we also help you academically. And if you don't have sports interest, we do robotics, esports. I brought some podcasting. So all of that's really cool. And the base, has welcomed me with open arms. So I absolutely love it there.
Yeah, and coaches are educators, man. At the end of the day, like they're educators. Like they're working with the youth no matter what the age level is or what the level is, period. And what I loved about the base and kind of just doing my homework on it a little bit is the second part of the stuff that you brought up as far as what else is there besides just sports. It is a place that kids can really go and kind of be themselves or really pursue something that, they're really interested in and doing it in a way that's fun for them and not pressure. You look at like sports now, and I can say this because I'm not like coaching or in sports, so it's probably a little safer for me to say, but there's a lot of pressure for kids, especially nowadays in schools, a lot of testing, right? But even on the field, I mean, there's so many AAU teams out there or leagues or whatever teams that you can play for, and you're just like constantly playing and playing, and the pressure of like you're doing it and you're doing it and you're doing it, you have to be successful. I mean, that's the pressure, right? And so being able to sometimes go to a place where there isn't as much pressure and you're doing it because yeah, you're getting trained and everything else, but there's guys in there like you that are there to help you develop your game, not to help you be like, you got to go to Major League Baseball or bust. Like that's not what it
Yeah, no.
is. And, I think that goes a long way for a kid that, they play a game because they love a game, right? And at some point, you don't want them to fall out of love with it because it's just all they do. So I think it's great that you add that place adds variety and again just kind of fits in with your personality. I think it's something that I really wanted to be able to give you the opportunity to plug, but also for you to kind of again talk to people about what you do because you're not just this guy who coaches and teaches. Even though you do both, you also do things outside of that really help kids. Like podcasting is really cool. Like I want to do that with my fifth grade class. They've been asking me about it. They watch all my YouTube stuff, and see everything that I post on YouTube. And yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a different element that I can introduce something like you can into their lives that maybe points them down that direction or helps them get to, that's something that they never thought they would actually really do. So I agree with you, man.
Absolutely. And the part of the reason what you coaching is you want to get back to the game and you want to see it continue to evolve and you want to see other players get better. And I feel like that can follow with passions, whether that's podcasting, regardless of what it is. But being able to have a lot of these kids get involved at 9 years old. Like I have this kid, Christoph. He's one of my favorites. And he's so educated. Him and his dad talk about business. They watch the news. So he comes in, and he has a notebook. It's a Dream Big notebook, and he writes down notes every week, and that when he wants to talk about, that's what we do for our Jumping Bases podcast. We go and we have some conversations, but we also talk about other things going on with the base going on there. But he's a really cool individual, and I really feel like having podcasting introduced to kids at 10 years old. I mean, I was introduced to it at 21. So if I was introduced to it at 10, just think of how much quicker I would have learned and how much more creative I would have been with all that, further, knowledge with it.
Yeah, and I think what's amazing about what you just said too is like it's the growth mindset of everything too. Like being able to grow in different ways. And I think sometimes we get, like I mentioned, we get caught up. A young kid gets caught up in just wanting to play baseball, baseball, hockey, football, basketball, that they sometimes don't develop those other passions or things that they want to pursue because they're just so locked in on those one or two things that they're doing. So I love it. I think it shows a lot of range with you as a young person in the coaching game. And that will kind of have me jump into my last little thing that I want to talk about, when it comes to baseball before we jump into, your podcast a little bit, which I want to ask you quite a few questions about. But what would be your advice to young coaches? Like for me, football was like year round. I mean, when football was over, it was about going to clinics and going to online seminars or going to college spring practices, or being involved in 7-on-7 some way or being in the weight room a lot. It's kind of like nonstop year round. I mean, and for you, you're bouncing around. And as a young guy, I know the sacrifices that come with like, your friends are going out for, in town to go have a good time or do whatever. And like, you're busy because you're at the base Friday night or you got a big game Saturday morning. And, there's sacrifices that you make because things that you love and you're passionate about, you make sacrifices for. So what would be your advice to young coaches out there, young guys maybe coming out of college like you were a few years ago, about if they're serious about jumping into the world of coaching, what would you say to them?
I definitely say get involved. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to teach and coach back at my high school, and I think it's a unique experience. And like you said, coaching at the base, that's a unique experience. But what I would also say is make sure you take the time to develop a relationship with your players, because just, disciplining and talking, in a sports perspective, even if they do take your advice, that's great, but you still want to be able to have in this role, in this leadership position, you still want to be able to impact them in other ways. And if something was going on at home, you'd want that player to be able to be comfortable to reach out to you, because if you want their best interest as a player, I feel like you also have to consider those things occasionally as well. So I think, building relationships with players is absolutely important, regardless of age. And just being able to relate and adapt. I think it's more of a responsibility of a coach to relate and adapt to the way that their players and kids are, compared to the kids, because they're still growing and their mentalities are all different and all over the place, where if you're in the leadership position, you definitely have more experience. So if you could tell that some are at different levels than others, go down to their level and make sure that you can make sure that they can relate.
I love it. Prediction for the 2022 baseball season for East Boston. You guys got a
Ooh.
squad, you got players coming back. How are you guys looking? What do you think your expectations are? Like, what is it that something that you guys want to do? Whether that's just win the league, make the playoffs, whatever. What's the squad look like a little bit?
The squad's definitely looking good this year. Like I talked about, we won our fall league, and that was the first time the Boston City League really did the fall league. So it's good. We played against Boston Latin Academy, and that Celtic Excel high school team that I talked about. So like I said, it was good to win that, but the goal every single season is city championships, right? You want to represent Boston, and you want to be able to be the team to come home with that title every year. And not so much for bragging rights, but just for the pride in the work that you put in, right? If you're really giving everything that you got, then that's what you deserve. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I definitely think that, it starts at city championships, and, it'd be nice to go to a state level too and see wherever it can go. And I do think that we have, a talented group of guys that want to be coached. And I feel like that's, the
Key.
difference in high school. When kids want to be coached and you feel that in this role, then it's on you to really make that happen, because they have big expectations for you. So I know my players have big expectations for me and the rest of the coaching staff. So it's on us to put them in successful positions and make sure that they really follow through and stay consistent even through the tough times.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I'll be interested in to follow you guys this year. Baseball is a sport that I feel is we're going to be covering actually a lot of baseball teams this year. So maybe we're going to take a trip down to Eastie. But
Yes, sir.
I'm excited. I'm excited for baseball season to start, and it's always good just to kind of hear. Boston City League's a big deal. I had a couple football players that transferred to me from Boston. That when they talked about the City League championship, it was like a big deal. And no
Mhm.
matter what the sport was. So it's cool to hear that the league has you guys have that competitive. It is. There's a lot of schools in Boston, I'm sure, and yeah, to win that it's a big deal. So very cool. Obviously, what's behind you since the Sandbox? When I first started podcasting, I forget how I fell and found you guys. I think maybe just like probably one day just scrolling through and being a weirdo on Instagram, because I've only had Instagram for like a year. I mean, last January was the first time I ever got in my life, period. So really like learning how to use it, and then you like click on somebody like, oh, I know that person, and then it's like, oh, people they follow, and you just get lost in this warp hole. And I probably came upon you that way, I'm guessing, especially East Boston. Just knowing a friend of mine that dates a girl in East Boston, so maybe that's how it all came. I don't remember, but I started listening to your guys' podcast, because what I found really cool is like at the time you're doing it with like two buddies, and you guys knew your stuff about fantasy, and it was just kind of funny listening to you guys, your vibe a little bit. Obviously, you knew each other. You had a lot of like, quick little 1-2 word witted answers, or just sometimes things the way they were said was really funny. But what I also found is you guys actually know what you're talking about, because I listened to like Matthew Berry and all these people, and I took their words seriously. I start somebody and they get me like 0.5, and I'd be like, I'm never listening to Matthew Berry again. But like I would listen to you guys, and I definitely took advice there. Some situations quarterback situations anyways. I had Kyler Murray down for a couple weeks. I was really listening in to see what your guys' thoughts were, because our waiver wire was okay, but I was curious to see what your pickups of the week and things like that were. So, I had a lot of fun listening to you guys, and over time we've talked and just kind of reached out to each other. We did a t-shirt exchange at one point, which was a lot of fun.
That's right.
I should have wore that. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, not even wearing it.
I was thinking the same thing, but I was like, it's about coaching, so let me represent.
Yeah,
so.
That's okay. That's okay. And so, so it's just like really cool to connect with you. But obviously, everything else on top of what you do, for me, like podcasting's like, it's almost like another full-time job. I mean, it's to the point that I have to sacrifice sleep because there's just not enough hours in the day to get what I got to get done, So, and that's on top of working and being a dad and being a husband and making sure that you balance those, because those are the things that are really important in life, like your real job, right? And, your family is the most important thing. And I've learned that having kids that, I don't want to lose time with them. And even with my wife, like I enjoy just like laying in bed sometimes after we put our twins to bed being like, oh my God, what a day, and it's just, those are my favorite little times. So to be able to do this and have fun and be successful with it, sometimes it's the sleep is the odd person out. So talk about your podcast. How'd you guys get it started? And you guys added some cool things over the last year. So I give you a chance to plug yourself, man. I'm just gonna sit back and enjoy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Since the Sandbox Podcast, how this got started was 2019. The guy in the middle here, Lou, he was actually the first one of us that was introduced to podcasting. He actually would report on MMA. It was called the MMA Countdown, and he had one called Lou's Vlog.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, I didn't know that. All right.
Yep. So started there. And we've been friends, our whole life. We've gone to school together over 15 years. So that we really, always had these conversations about hot topics in sports, playing video games together, playing sports together. East Boston, you're growing up with the same age kids going to the school. So, that relationship's just really strong. And that's why we're called Since the Sandbox, that relationship. And, when it comes to sports, we were thinking about podcast names, and you want to be specific to the sport, but I thought it was unique that we chose to be specific to ourselves. And I feel like that's what really stands out. And like you said, we talk about football all the time, but what we like to say is unique about our podcast is the way we talk about it. And yeah, Lou and Kev, they've been really busy. Kev's a coach at East Boston High School for basketball, so he's in his busy season. Lou just got a promotion, so it's been a little hard to coordinate times where we've all been able to do it together. But this is how we started. We started together. They're always welcomed and involved whenever it's time to do things like that. But we started with just football. Lou invited me on Lou's Vlog, and we had a conversation. I absolutely loved it.
So Lou's the ringleader here. Lou is the guy who kind of got the wheels going a little bit with the MMA stuff. Okay.
Lou got us introduced. He invited us on his podcast, and me and Lou were like, okay, yeah, we're going to start a podcast. We're going to build it together. And we told that to Kev. And then Kev was like, oh, like we should just add basketball. So that's why we had the football and basketball touch. So, just having that was really unique. And I think that the most important part about all of it was, being able to do that together. So we started that September 1st, 2019. We've been doing it a couple of years now. And we started off, doing fantasy rankings. Everyone loves fantasy, and everyone has different views, different opinions throughout fantasy football. So we figured, why not share ours? And we just started to see if we wanted to stay consistent with it. And, now we've done it for over 2 years, and we've added things, we've taken away things. We started with, NFL games of the week, and we would all talk about a couple of games that we liked. And then we realized after 2 or 3 of us were talking about 2 or 3 different games, that's half the schedule.
Right.
So we switched up our content a little bit. We do power rankings, we do bold predictions.
And that's what I love, dude. You guys have like switched it up. I think that's what's so good about you guys is that you're not always like, we try here so hard to always be different, and you guys do such a good job. And I think, not that you like rebranded yourself, because you most certainly didn't, but you guys just added different features on. The logo is a little different now, which I'm digging totally too.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I love that. I love that. What would you say did you always kind of plan like we got to switch things up, or just kind of as you're doing stuff, more ideas pop into your head and you're just like, let's do this and let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah, I feel like, when you do things consistently and you're growing, I feel like you feel what people like and you feel like what people don't. And when we were starting podcasting, it was all new to us. So I feel like a lot of it's trial and error, and it still is now. I mean, I talked to you on the phone and I was talking about, approaching episode 350 for Since the Sandbox. That's a huge accomplishment for us. And we're a couple hundred downloads away from 25,000 downloads. So
Wow.
those are really, cool things that,
Very good
I never.
numbers. Yeah.
Thank you. Cool things that, I never really, expected. And, when you see things like that and when you hear people, sending you message saying, oh, like we started a podcast because of you, or like, you made us comfortable with wanting to talk about what we want to talk about with podcasting. That's what was, really unique. And that's why I kind of liked, getting into podcasting when we did, because podcasting's still fairly early now in 2022. And when we started 3 years ago, 2019, it was definitely less mainstream, but now you see, a lot more people starting to do it. So, it is really cool. What we also added is, a lot of community things. We do our Thanksgiving community can drive. We do our toy drive that we, partner with our state representative Adrian Madaro from East Boston, and we just cater to his event for Eastie's Elves.
He was on We the People, right? He was on We the People, right?
What, Meet the People?
You meet the sorry, that's I meant to say. Meet the People.
Not yet, but
Okay.
it's in the works.
But you had someone on there that was like a government person, right?
Yeah, we had someone that was running for state senate.
Senate. Okay.
Yeah, but they did not get elected. Sadly. So it's all good though. We do have a lot of friendships. Being in East Boston a lot, the people that whether at community events, things like that, or when you give back, you do see a lot of the similar faces. So that's just the reason why, when you build on those relationships and working at the Boys and Girls Club, East Boston High School, you see a lot of those people around. So having a relationship with them, doing events like that, and we actually all went to Catholic school together, and we're part of the choir, so we actually sang at the event when we were kids.
That's great.
Wasn't a choice. We were kind of forced to do it, but it is what it is. But yeah, it's really cool everything we get to do with the podcast, and having a t-shirt that says Born and Raised in Eastie, that's our signature shirt. I mean, that's really cool too. Never thought, I'd see people, walking down the street with our shirts on.
Right. I mean, that it is like, I had like a couple students that in my class that like parents like wanted t-shirts, and I gave them t-shirts, and yeah, there's just something about it that it's like, wow, it's really cool that this is my thing. And I know you guys like sell your shirts at like even like a store in Eastie, right?
We do.
So, yes, someone goes in and actually wants to buy it, dude, and wear it. Like, I think that's really cool.
Yep. Meridian Market.
You guys
so
do
if anyone in East Boston, go to Meridian Market, pick a Meridian special, tell them Steve sent you, and then pick up a Since the Sandbox t-shirt.
Hey, listen, that's great. And you guys, you do all your own t-shirts, right? You do all the pressing for them and everything too. So that's even like, again, that's like a side job. It's another thing that you do, but it's part of the hustle of growing your podcast. And
people have no idea.
Yeah, it's they don't, and that's like, but again, what else, like when people have a lot of time on their, or have time on their hand, like they want to spend their time how they want to spend their time. And what I've learned is like time has become so much more valuable to me, and how I spend it and who I spend it with is important to me, and I right now I'm very busy with this, and I don't see as many people as I wish I could, but I also understand to like build something great and to do something great, like sacrifices come, and it's not like I don't want to see people, I do, but like right now I just know I'm kind of locked into what I'm doing, and I know what we're building, and I know what we have, and like you do, and you keep adding on to it and different things. And I've met more people in the last year podcasting and DMing through Instagram that I've built like pretty good relationship and friendships with, that we help each other out if we can, we go on each other's podcasts, we do reviews together. Like, it's been fun, man. And just watching you guys do it, and you can just tell there's a connection there. Obviously, you guys known each other for a long time. And that's things I listen to. Like when I listen to podcasts, like obviously there's interesting podcasts that I listen to, but I also like listening to podcasts that have more than one guest, because it's interesting with the dynamic. And I think you guys you kind of do that dynamic right. You all balance each other off in a different way. And,
thank you.
It is fun to listen to. Where do you see it? Like, what's the direction that you want to go with this? Like, where do you kind of see this, maybe, let's say this time next year?
So we had a conversation before, we all got started with this. And it was just kind of like, what we ever wanted, and what would happen if, the podcast ever worked out the way we wanted to.
Yeah.
We said, at worst, we started at 22, 23 years old, and, we build, a lot of experience, and, you learn along the way. So I feel like that's still kind of where we're at. But I also think that we've seen the podcast go in directions where it's like, okay, like maybe we do a little bit more of this, and like this maybe can be something that we do on a more frequent basis, because a lot of our work, is pre-recorded on a weekly basis. And whether that's, meeting together, or, me doing some solo content, sometimes whatever has to happen for our amazing fans at Since the Sandbox, you have to make it happen. What a podcast, what it takes. And like you said, the sacrifice and the grind of putting it all together, and what goes in, before and after the microphone goes on and off, it is definitely a lot to commit. But we have some companies reaching out to us, sending us some free products that are talking about collaborations. I think that's really cool. It would be nice to really get, some sponsorships, and just get back, so that, not so it didn't benefit us so much, but so that we can continue to, grow our brand, our podcast, and continue to serve, all the people that enjoy listening to us. Because, there are days, Anthony, that you and I both know where it's like, okay, like this is a lot of work, and I have this, and this to do already. But, when you start to see things like 350 podcast episodes, or almost 25,000 downloads, you get reminded that, you're on the right path, or you're doing the right thing, or this is where you're supposed to be. And not everyone's goals or aspirations are to be, Joe Rogan or Lil Wayne. But if you can, serve your niche, and you could do it well, and you can make an impact, like I feel like we're making, in our community, 2,500 canned goods, the past 2 Thanksgivings.
Love seeing that on social media, dude. I think that's a really cool thing you guys do.
Thank you. Over 500 toys, the past 2 Christmases. And, those are all things that we're doing, besides our own family, besides, our own Christmas. And we're going out of the way. Like, nobody knows that I work 6 days a week, and my free time after I work on a Saturday, or my free time on a Sunday, is going around picking up those toys, counting those cans, making sure that we're in contact with our partners in our neighboring places that those are going to make sure that everything's, fulfilled for people that really do need the help. And there are a lot of people that need help, with COVID, things were a struggle. We got a whole war going on in Europe right now.
Right.
So, any single way that, when you're in a position to have, a platform, and you could do something solid for people that need it, definitely take advantage of doing it. And I don't know how much time I'm going to be able to commit to this. I might have a family like yourself one day, and I'm going to have my own kids. I'm going to have to prioritize to first, or whatever it may be. I might not have that time, but I have a little bit extra time now. So that's why I do as much as I can when I'm young, because I know, when you get older, things get more complicated. So I'd rather push myself a little extra now, knowing that it'll probably get me better later on. And if it doesn't, it was still all the right things to do.
I think that's like the best advice you could give anybody, because you're so right. Like, when I look back at being younger, the time that I had, again, it might not have been a lot more, but it was more, and like this, it is hard to balance with 2 twin 3-year-olds upstairs, and being able to like know their schedule and what they're doing and what they're committed to, and then trying to build your schedule around that. It's tough. It's really tough. And one thing that, one piece of advice that I just love to give you, just listening to you talk, like, what you're doing, right? And you got, like, you're in this cool phase right now that you're, people reaching out to you about collab and products and things like that. Like, do it, do all of it, anything, even if it doesn't even pertain to your show, do it, because it's getting eyes on you, it's getting ears on you, and that's what you want at the end of the day. This is your product. Like, I didn't go to school for this, right? So figuring this all out was a challenge for me. But the one thing I knew is what my topic is in covering high school sports and coaching, because that's what I had been doing literally while I was teaching my entire career. So sometimes people are like, you should do this, and you should do that, and you should do that. And some advice is great. Don't get me wrong. I've taken plenty of advice, but everyone gives you advice, and everyone tells you what you should be doing all the time, and bet on you. Like, what you're doing, where you want to go. You guys all talk about this, you communicate. Like, people are going to give you good ideas, don't get me wrong, but everyone's going to try to give you an idea, and you just got to make sure that you kind of stick to who you are, tweak your show accordingly. But at the end of the day, like, it's you. Nobody else is putting the work, the hours, the power into it like you are. They're just sitting there having a drink with you or a bite to eat with you or texting with you, being like, oh, I think you should do this, blah, 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 blah. But they might not know the first thing about the 740 other things you have to do before you even worry about that, So
Absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
it, man. Well, this was great having you on. And I want to jump into our last segment of the show. It's called our Cheeny's 2-minute drill. I mentioned Cheeny's earlier in the podcast. They've been one of our good friends since day one. They have been riding with us, watching them grow and us grow. It's been a lot of fun. It's on School Street, right near the Boston Garden. Perfect place to go pre-Celtics, pre-Bruins, and obviously afterwards. They're open till like 3 a.m. every night. So it's a cool spot. The Iron Cheenies are great. Their pizza's great. Pillow calzones. Nothing,
Wow.
the best ones in the state. Like and that's no insult to any food places or maybe any places in Eastie, but if you go to Cheeny's and order a pillow, like a calzone of anything, it's like a pillow. It's out of this world. It's out
I'm
of this
hungry
world.
already.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you. We'll talk after. You're pretty close to there. So, but we're gonna jump into our 2-minute drill. And again, I'm just gonna kind of ask you some rapid fire questions. 1 or 2 word answers. If you want to explain something, you can definitely throw the red flag and explain it a little bit more, and vice versa. If I want you to explain something a little bit more, I'll do the same thing. All right.
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. So we'll start the clock, and it's a range of questions. You're a podcast guy. Usually, I stick to coaching and so on, but I kind of mixed it up because you cover a lot of different things too. Toughest away field in conference to play a game at?
Definitely Boston Latin. Boston
Okay.
Latin Academy, definitely going to be tough. We play them twice a year. Always tough.
Okay. Beyond podcast is asking since the Sandbox this NFL or NBA. What do you think is your more consistent picks in fantasy?
Oh, I'm definitely the NFL guy. If you hear the basketball content, the basketball picks, that's more Lou and Kev. I'm definitely the NFL guy. Don't listen to their fantasy takes of football.
I love it. I want them to hear that too. Song that still gets you kind of juiced up a little bit before a big game or maybe before a big podcast.
Anything J. Cole. Anything J. Cole. I'm definitely game with he's impacted me in ways that I never thought, someone musically would be able to. Artist, the things he does, all around his work is absolutely incredible. So definitely J. Cole.
Okay, awesome. I love it. I haven't heard J. Cole yet. It's the first time I've ever heard that. That's great. His music is great. I love the variety of that question. That's why I always ask it. Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for blank in 2022.
You're not gonna like it, but the Green Bay Packers.
Okay.
It's
I'm
boring.
throwing the
It's
red
basic.
flag. I want to hear it.
It's boring. It's basic, but look, at the end of the day, there's not a place that's going to satisfy Aaron Rodgers any more than Green Bay. And realistically, it's probably the only place where he'll be able to still be partners with Devontae Adams. I feel like that's a big relationship to him, just like Gronk was to Tom Brady. And we saw, how that works for their career. I do know things are a little complicated with that scenario. It is frustrating every single year seeing, Green Bay go get the bye week and then lose the second game, whether it's to the 49ers or the Giants a couple years back. You got to shout
You got to
that
throw
out.
the Giants in. I knew you were going to at some point.
But I think it's tough. I know the obvious connection with the Denver Broncos and Nathaniel Hackett is there, but I honestly think it's Green Bay Packers a retirement for Rodgers.
Okay, I like it. I think obviously you hear the chatter about it. Denver's a very interesting spot with a pretty good receiving core and your offensive coordinator as a head coach. And I think Tennessee is too. I think Tennessee is arguably the quarterback away from being the best team in the AFC. So Derrick Henry doesn't get hurt and your wide receivers don't get as banged up as their wide receivers were. That's a tough team to play anywhere. So be interesting. But I mean, Rodgers staying in Green Bay, I see it. I see it. Taking this long, I see it. One word to describe your coaching style.
Passionate.
You know how many coaches say that? That means you get like fired up, right? You must get really fired up.
I definitely think, as a coach, I feel like you have to be passionate. If you're not passionate about the sport, I feel like that love for it doesn't, really trickle down to your players. But, I don't think you have to be, a rah-rah guy to be passionate about it either. And I think that's kind of like my uniqueness to it.
I agree. That's great. That's awesome. Last question. Best podcast that you listen to right now?
Since the Sandbox or the Beyond podcast. No, but I'll be honest. The first podcast I actually ever listened to, and you know, there's a lot of podcasts, but it was actually the Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, NFL analysts. They do a lot of the draft coverage. And when I was going back and forth to Salem State, you know, I drive up when I was living in East Boston, drive up the Revere Beach to Linway, all the way up through Swabscott to get to Salem. And, you know, sometimes you liked listening to music driving down the beach, and sometimes, you know, you wanted to just kind of be involved in the conversation. And, you know, everyone watches them on NFL Network when it comes to the draft coverage, unless it's, you know, Todd McShay on ESPN. But I really love hearing their analysis and their further breakdowns to what I already get to see through the basic human eye, you know?
Yeah. That's great, man. Well, listen, you survived the 2-minute drill. And I just want to say thanks for coming on here today. You know, like I said at the top of this, assistant coaches month to me, 15 years of my career was dedicated to being an assistant coach. And to me, being able to be an assistant is a lot different than being the head coach as far as really just coaching the game, you know? So I appreciate it so much. And I think that, you know, this month is always the most valuable month that we have a year, because I had a few coaches just last year that were on this, that were head coaching candidates that, you know, maybe made to a finalist and didn't get it, but they were there, or they're almost there. And, you know, I could see that in your future, if that's what you're looking to pursue, or blowing up in the podcast is what you pursue, whatever it is that you're going to pursue. I know you're going to have a lot of success doing it, because you got to work ethic, you got to drive, and you got variety, man. That's the key. You're not just kind of like pigeonholed to one thing. You kind of look at what you're doing, and those relationships that you develop over the years I have is helping me with this podcast a lot, because you do build a network of even some of these kids that you coach eventually going to be doing something, and that something could help you, you know, and I've had that happen. So it's really nice in that world too. So I wish you the best of luck, and I appreciate you coming on here today.
Awesome. Anthony, it was so much fun. I got to say, as far as the future goes, it's all in God's hands. Got a lot of love and faith in all of that, but this was an awesome experience. Like I said, I don't know too many people that are highlighting coaches the way you do and touching on a bunch of different high school sports. So this is a really unique niche that you have, and you do a great job with it. You have a lot of partners, and this was an awesome conversation. Thank you. And I know that there'll be plenty of more. So more to come. Thank you, Beyond Podcast fans, and make sure you go and check out the Since the Sandbox podcast.
Absolutely. So Steve Tauro, East Boston High School baseball, Since the Podcast host. Great guest today, guys. Till next time.